This week, we're going to dedicate a fair amount of time talking about your lawn, fertilizing the grass, cutting the grass, and the little inventions created to support this mission. On Coffee Talk, we get an update on crop progress from Rural Reflections West and Rural Reflections East, and we somehow even end up talking about old motorcycles. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You've got Rural Reflections West in the form of Dave Nelson out in Carrington, North Dakota, and Rural Reflections East. That's me, Grant Nelson, here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, let's get right into it with some coffee talk. I just picked mine up for the afternoon. Gives me a nice little boost for the day. What have you had going on this weekend? I know you did a little bit of work at the shop this morning. Lots of farmers coming in, or are they doing pretty well out in the field?
They're doing real well. I mean, they've gotten a lot done, and they're, the one thing about being extremely dry, they're seeding every acre that they have. There's sloughs right through the sloughs and all. So they're doing real well with getting done. I would say they should be pretty much done by the end of next week. But, edible beans comes in there at the end of May usually. So there probably will be a little bit of that left. But otherwise, pretty much I think everything will be in, all soybeans and corn and small grains.
Yeah, I think we're going to be wrapped up here sometime next week. I talked to one of the fellows from the fertilizer plant, and we were talking about a construction site that's going to get started here pretty soon. And we had heard that it was going to be the 20th of May. And he said, "Oh, good. We'll be done by then. We'll have everything spread and everything done that we need to do." So we're coming along pretty well out here also. Now, this is the fishing opener weekend in Minnesota. Dave, when's the fishing opener in North Dakota? Do you know?
Well, we don't really have a fishing opener. We just have ice fishing season ends, and then normal fishing begins. So it's not like in Minnesota where you want to stay off the highways on the Friday before and that. We haul a lot of stuff out of Benson, Minnesota. So we just naturally don't go on that Friday before fishing opener because first of all, you can't get a permit to go over dimensions. And then the next thing is sometimes the roads get a little scary the closer you get to the cities.
Yeah, I believe that. We were sitting here on Friday and we were watching out the window. We're right along Highway 32. And I thought to myself, it looks like somebody must be having a boat sail up north or something because there's a lot of them heading up that way. Of course, around here, everybody goes up to Lake of the Woods and has some pretty good fishing. And up near Lake of the Woods was Uncle Gilmer Flotten. And what we thought we'd talk about today were mowers and some of the homemade equipment that people made for mowers or some of the little spray rigs, that sort of thing that people come up with. And, of course, all the cool tools that are pulled behind a three-wheeler. And Gilmer, well, he was ahead of his time, Dave, when it came to homemade doodle bugs and that sort of thing, wasn't he?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, he was. I don't think there was too many people had riding lawnmower, and he had built several of them. And he had he mowed the entire yard around grain bins, and anything that was green and in his yard was mowed regularly, So his place always looked real spiffy, and I imagine he needed something of a little bigger size to mow all that. So he invented himself a couple of lawnmowers, and, that was in early 60s riding mowers. I don't know how many of them are out there at that time, but not nearly as prevalent as they are now.
No, I think most people get a lot of store-bought now, but that was back in the days when you were getting, instructions and that sort of thing out of Popular Mechanics, or you were buying those tiny little Caterpillars from the Struck Corporation, and people had a need for some new mechanical stuff. I mean, we were coming along at that time when it was starting to become more standard, where you had, maybe even a couple of tractors and a car on the farm. And it was a nice progression when Gilmer went to riding lawnmowers. And of course, I think both of us have pictures riding on his various lawnmowers and his small tractors. I remember one with me, and I sure looked happy riding on that one, Dave.
Well, I know I had a ball driving them. They were just, they were maybe just a little less handy to operate than nowadays, but they still operated well, and it was fun to get on one and drive one, even if we weren't mowing, and that was the thing we always waited for when we went up there. I wonder if we can drive that, and pretty soon it would come out of the shed, and he'd let you go driving.
At that time, it was almost they were almost modern. It was like driving a real exciting new toy. Nowadays, I'd like to go drive one just for the simplicity of it. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about the simplicity of just push rods and easy to understand mechanisms that really draws me in. I mean, there's also something that really draws me in about high tech, but there's something about going back in time and that nice simplicity to the tractors that he made and the lawnmowers and that sort of thing that, I don't know, it just brings me back. I don't know what it is. Can you tell me, Dave? I mean, what's the attraction?
Oh, I think it's the challenge is what the attraction for him. I think I can make one of these, make one of my own, So that's probably why he built them, and it's fun to be associated with that stuff and drive something that not too many other people would have ever had a chance to drive,
It reminds me, and this is going off on a little tangent, and folks, we'll get back to the lawnmowers and the other things we started talking about at the beginning here in a little bit. But recently I saw a company that's producing a motorcycle that looks like it was probably an era from the 1920s, 1930s. You can see the whole frame, not a ton of body parts, a long, narrow gas tank, has suspension, but you definitely can see the coil-over suspension, I believe is what it had on the front. I can't remember what it was on the back. I think just a couple of simple springs and small engines. It's become so standard that everybody's got 1,000 cc's or better on their motorcycle. And there's something novel about just being able to go out on a 250 cc or a 450 cc motorcycle or any kind of smaller, have the smaller engine. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just, for me, it's that I feel it's all I need, and that the rest of it is just excess, and it just doesn't seem like it's something I want to be a part of. I like having it properly sized for me. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. I used to drive a 450 Suzuki, and I wanted to buy a 500 Kawasaki in the worst way. And those things, if you cranked on the throttle on them, you better be hanging on. So I don't know what in the world you do with 1,000 cc's, but I know it's always bigger motor, bigger this, bigger that, bigger back tire on a motorcycle, But I'm just fine with something that's just ample enough to do what I need and go out and putt around a little bit.
I feel exactly the same way. I remember those little Yamaha RD 400s or 440s or whatever they were, and they would get up and go like few. And plus, they had a nice athletic feel to them. There wasn't a whole bunch of weight you had to throw around. Folks, we're going to get back to lawnmowers and talking about some of the homemade equipment that people had way back when and even nowadays. We're going to take a quick break, though. We'll be back. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You've got Dave Nelson out in Carrington, Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, before we got on today, we were talking a little bit about mowing the grass. Grass is probably one of the most expensive crops that you'll never make money on. I was thinking a little bit about how fishing is kind of an expensive way to eat fish. And it's kind of the same with grass. I mean, if you're going to have a yard, it's one of the more expensive ways, and so it's a more convenient way because you don't have to go out and weed and that sort of thing. But once you get into the realm of driving a lawnmower, it's pretty easy to spend money. I think about zero turns. They're pretty expensive. Some of the nicer small garden tractors, they, you're going to start at $3,500 and probably work your way up, and you're going to have some awfully nice things on them. But it gets to be a bit spendy. I mean, if you want to really get in there and start fertilizing your lawn and really going after all the dandelions and everything like that, time and management and money, you can invest a fair amount, Dave.
Oh, man, can you ever? I was just listening on the radio or I guess it was this week sometime, and they were talking about I believe it was a Scott's fertilizer plan for your yard. 6 times over your yard from spring to fall.
See,
so you start out with the crabgrass preventer. That's the first thing in the spring. That's got to be out early so it gets the crabgrass. Then there's, maintenance in the summer, and you got to get some extra nitrogen to keep it green. And then, of course, you have to do a couple of finish-ups at the end of the year. And I'm like, holy cow. I look at fertilizing my lawn maybe twice a year, and I don't use Weed Be Gone. I just spot spray the dandelions if they come up and so on. But if I was going to do what they're doing, I'd be busy all the time in the lawn, just fertilizing and spraying and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's unending number of things you can do, and if you really want to cost yourself a lot of money, put in a irrigating system so that your grass is always green and growing fast, and then you can put more fertilizer on so it grows even faster. And, it just compounds itself. So I like it in a little bit of moderation because really it's a very expensive part of homeownership if you're going to have the brightest green, nicest cut, best looking lawn in the neighborhood.
And it's good to take care of your lawn, but I always think back in my head when I see people out fertilizing your lawn, you're just asking for trouble. It's just going to grow more and you're going to have to do more work. Plus, with that plan you had there, you're talking about with the 6 different installments there, you'll have payments all winter long getting ready for the next spring. And I always thought to myself when I saw people expanding their lawn, cutting down trees or moving out into maybe a little bit of old pasture or an old area where they may be kept outdoor like cultivators and that sort of thing. I always thought they're just asking for trouble. And you know who does that now? Me. Lisa has even said that a couple times, but she said, boy, the old you would have said, there's an old guy looking for trouble. And I'm afraid that's exactly what I'm doing. I remember when we were kids, I can remember when you had moved out of the house by then, but we had that pretty good sized lawn, and I'm sure you had to take care of it prior to me too. We had that 20-inch push mower for a lot of it, and then we moved on to that little rider. And that push mower, that was built like a tank. I mean, that had a nice steel deck, and we'd push that thing around and push all day long and get that lawn mowed. And it worked out pretty good, but actually, I got a little tired of it sometimes,
Well, this year I bought a full-type fertilizer spreader because I have a lot that goes beyond our yard, and I decided I was going to fertilize it all because the grass out there doesn't get any fertilizer on it ever.
Yeah.
And what did I do but put it on the driest years that I recall us having on our grass, and it's just laying out there doing nothing yet. So I don't know when that fertilizer is going to come on, if we get any rain or not, but I was really expecting to give it a little extra greenness, and it's all burnt brown right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, the first time you get some rain, you're going to wake up the next day, and there's going to be cattle in your yard. They're going to be like, this looks so good and so tasty, we got to get after it right away.
Yeah, it's, my my dog likes to eat grass all the time, so he'll be the first one out there munching away. But maybe sheep or something like that can take care of my little outlot.
One thing, too, before we move on for today, Dave, I was going to ask you, how are your conditions out there? I know you said everybody's got their crops in and everything like that, but I've seen in North Dakota extreme drought conditions. We've got anywhere from severe to moderate drought, which I guess that moderate drought, if you're going to have drought, that's probably the best one to have, I guess. I don't know. But how's everybody doing out there? I mean, has there been some green up? I mean, are the small grains coming out or anything?
They're coming up in spots, but it's like a lot of people were worried about. You know, it's not coming up all over. I mean, it's just too dry, and so there's going to be, if we do get rain and do get some kind of a crop, it'll be spotty because there'll be stuff that's 3 weeks difference in age, you know. So it's hard to combine. So you have to decide whether you want to let the early stuff shell out or let the green stuff go in green, you know. I mean, it's just hard to know. But we'll know that by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's right. There's always a time it's going to happen. I mean, that does make for a harvest that gets kind of stretched out, and it makes you worry more if you actually finally get some moisture. Then you're really exposed for an awful long time when that finally happens. Now, up here, I've noticed people are still out there putting in their mostly row crop. Now, I haven't seen many planters or anything like that. I've seen mostly drills and that sort of thing, or seeders, excuse me. I've seen mostly just drills. And they're doing pre-emerge right now, so you know, there's still hope and optimism that things are going to be okay. So I guess we'll just have to hope we get a little rain. And, of course, like Dad used to say, oh, now if it'll just stop. I remember that standing out in the dairy barn with him that one night, and it had been dry, and we were worried. And it started raining, and we were doing pretty well. I said, hey, that's pretty good. We got rain coming down. He goes, yeah, now if it'll just stop there, you know. So there's two sides to every weather event, it seems.
You know, one time I was discussing with an old farmer what they were going to do. It was in the late 80s when it was very dry at that point too. And I said, so what are you going to do? Are you going to plant a crop, or are you going to just give it up and, you know, not put anything in till later, or grow some hay crop on there or something? And he said, well, Davy boy, I never did put in a crop not expecting to harvest something. So, you know, he had it right. You know, you got to put something in every year and hope for the best. There's a lot of risk in farming, and most of these guys have to be the eternal optimists because there's plenty of things working against them right now.
That's a good way to end the podcast today, Dave. It's a hopeful but realistic way we go out. You got anything else for us today?
No, same as always. We're just going to keep hoping for rain.
That sounds all right. We'll talk to you next week, okay?
All right. See you, Grant.
See you later. There he is, my brother Dave Nelson, out in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. And this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.